Discover the incredible moment I saved my daughter-in-law against all odds. An amazing transformation that changed everything. Margaret sat in her modest kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee swirling around her like a comforting embrace. Nestled in the hills of Maplewood, this quiet town had always afforded her peace. Yet at 65, she felt the tectonic plates of her life shifting. The recent marriage of her son Jake to Emma had introduced a whirlwind she could hardly comprehend. Emma's ambition, a tornado of dreams and corporate battles, was a stark contrast to the simplicity Margaret cherished. Today, she felt that turmoil wrapping around her throat, like a noose. "Is this really how family is supposed to be?" she whispered, her voice breaking with doubt. As she fiddled with her old silver locket, which held a picture of Jake as a child, memories flooded in of simpler days. Days where teaching was everything, where children expressed curiosity in magnificent bursts. But now, she felt an internal struggle, wondering if her maternal acceptance of Emma's restless ambition was her downfall. How could she understand someone who thrived amidst harsh competitiveness when she had raised Jake on altruism and hard work? The growing shadow of Emma's corporate life loomed heavier by the day. Tension coiled tighter around her heart upon hearing whispered conversations about Claire, Emma's colleague with an envy-fueled vendetta who thrived in cutthroat surroundings. Margaret's brow furrowed in concern. She could practically see the weight of pressure on Emma's shoulders, dragging her down into the murky waters of doubt. Margaret wanted nothing more than to extend her hand, but the nature of Emma's world felt alien and intimidating. Suddenly, her phone vibrating against the countertop shook her from her reverie. It was Emma, her voice shaky, yet filled with determination. "Maggie, I need your help. It's Claire. She's accused me of stealing a project." Margaret felt dread plummet into her stomach. The wind seemed to knock against her. She wished desperately to reach through the phone, to pull Emma back from the brink. "What can I do?" she forced out, fighting the swirl of panic brewing inside. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Margaret's resolve ignited, but with it came an avalanche of fear. The notion of stepping into the corporate world was nauseating. Her mind raced with flashes of boardrooms, sharp suits, and relentless criticisms. What did she truly know about corporate law? But as she glanced at a photo of Emma on the fridge, her heart thudded heavier. This wasn't just about her. This was about family. Drawing a deep breath, she plunged into the unknown, reaching out to former colleagues for guidance. With each phone call, her confidence surged, though insecurity lurked just beneath the surface. What if connecting the dots between Emma's case and their old teaching friendships led nowhere? What if she opened a can of worms she wasn't prepared to confront? In the midst of her research, the attic beckoned, a forgotten world of paper trails and family secrets. With a sudden twist of fate, she unearthed letters linking her family to powerful alliances that had the potential to turn the tables for Emma. Just as hope ignited within her, dread draped itself across her shoulders. A dark secret from their family's past lingered, threatening to rear its ugly head. Margaret braced herself for the confronting shadows as she stood at the edge of a precipice, uncertain of what she might uncover next. Would she and Emma summon the strength to face the storms ahead, or would their pursuit of truth unravel the very fabric of their family? Margaret's heart raced as she closed the dusty attic door behind her, sealing off the relics of a life long past. Each letter and photo clutched in her hands felt like a key to the unknown. The discovery ignited a fierce determination within her. Maybe there was a way to help Emma, but the looming shadow of family secrets filled her with dread. With the letters spread out on her old dining table, she squinted at the elegant cursive. Names from decades ago danced before her eyes. Friends, mentors, even adversaries. Who had they once been in a world so far removed from the pressures of corporate machinations? Were these old alliances a gateway to salvage Emma's career, or were they simply ghosts that would haunt their family narrative? Margaret sorted through the letters like precious gems, searching for connections. She gasped when she recognized a familiar name, Thomas Lindell, an influential figure in the corporate world who had crossed paths with her late husband. Recollections flooded her of gatherings filled with laughter, negotiation bravado, and spirited discussions. Could Thomas be the ally Emma needed? The logical part of her mind raised a cautionary hand. Her past experiences in education rarely prepared her for corporate intrigue. Do I dare reach out? She pondered aloud, feeling both exhilarated and terrified. Caution warred with hope, and eventually her desire to protect Emma tilted the scales. She quickly gathered her phone and, with trembling fingers, began to compose a message. Hours in the attic had awakened something dormant in Margaret, a spark of ambition that had long been subdued by the rhythms of routine life. It felt invigorating, yet foreign. Allowing herself to embrace this new chapter brought with it a surge of adrenaline. Each moment spent away from her comfort zone propelled her further into this daunting world. As she awaited Thomas's response, Margaret decided to pay Emma a visit. Navigating through the golden glow of afternoon light filtering through the trees, she contemplated the motivational conversations they could have in person. Magic brewed in the air. It was as if she could touch the boundaries of their relationship, breaking down the invisible barriers that made them strangers. When she arrived at Emma and Jake's apartment, Margaret found Emma pacing, her expression taut with anxiety. "Maggie!" she exclaimed, relief flooding her voice. "You came!" "I had to," Margaret replied, crossing the threshold with newfound resolve. Sitting together in the cozy living room, Margaret sensed an urgency in Emma that mirrored her own. Each sharing exchange felt like peeling back layers of fear and misunderstanding. An essence of vulnerability enveloped them. "I can't let Claire win," Emma confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Margaret felt the weight of her daughter-in-law's turmoil deepening. "Then let me help," she said quietly, her heart swelling in that moment of connection. There was something powerful in recognizing her role as family, even if she felt inadequate. But the deeper question loomed in the air between them. What was needed to confront the real challenges ahead? They had to strike the right balance between old allegiances and the present dangers that lay ahead. As they embraced the truth that they were no longer isolated, they began to formulate a plan, a tangible path forward. Margaret felt a rush of clarity. The tension between ambition and simplicity was beginning to dissolve. Just as Margaret felt ready to reveal the existence of Thomas Lindell, her phone chimed with an incoming message. She hesitated, anxiety creeping in again. Was it the answer she longed for, or another curveball to navigate? Hungry for answers, she glanced at the screen. The name sent a chill down her spine. It was Claire, and the message was laced with threats that could unravel everything. The storm was brewing, and Margaret had to decide, would they prepare to battle together, or would they falter under the weight of fear? As she looked over at Emma, the uncharted territory of their relationship spread out before them, fraught with challenges that demanded courage and resilience. Determined not to back down, Margaret took a deep breath, feeling the foundation of her intentions shift. They were poised on the brink of confrontation, and this time she would ensure they faced it head-on. The moment hung in the air, echoing the profound realization that life's turning points often emerged from unexpected connections. Would they claim their path, or find themselves ensnared in Claire's dark schemes? The question lingered, heavy with potential and peril, drawing them both reluctantly toward the danger ahead. Margaret's grip tightened on her phone as the tension in the room escalated. Emma's eyes flickered with a mix of fear and determination. The message from Claire wasn't just a threat. It was a glimpse into the ferocity of the battle they faced. Rising from the couch, Margaret paced, the rhythm of her footsteps echoing their urgency. "Okay, let's think this through," she said, formulating a strategy in her mind. Each step she took felt weighty with purpose, a welcome departure from her usual role. This was new terrain, and she felt both the thrill of stepping into a more assertive identity and the unease of unfamiliar responsibility. She was no longer merely a passive observer in Emma's life. She was an active protector. Emma followed her movement with anxious eyes. "What if we just ignore her? Maybe she'll back off," she suggested, her voice tinged with vulnerability. Margaret paused, allowing Emma's words to settle. Ignoring Claire could very well be the worst choice. "Articles don't think like we do. They spur into action. What if she surprises us next?" Margaret replied, her voice steady, yet edged with urgency. The thought of being overrun by Claire's strategies propelled Margaret further into a strategic mindset. She recalled everything she had learned in her years as an educator, how to motivate, to inspire, to instill confidence. Emma needed more than just emotional support. She needed tangible steps forward. "We need intel. If Claire is so bold, then she's likely underestimated us," Margaret reasoned as ideas began to flow. "Thomas might have insight into our predicament, or even ways to counter whatever scheme Claire has in play." Emma's brow furrowed. "You mean you want to contact him, after all these years?" The question hung heavily in the air. Reaching out to Thomas felt daunting, but so did the prospect of facing Claire without allies. "I do. It may just be the foothold we need," Margaret stated, allowing a fragment of fear to fuel her conviction. She glanced out of the window, the evening light casting a warm glow over the trees, an unyielding reminder of the chaos shaping their lives. As Margaret stepped away from Emma, she felt the spark of her ambition strengthen into something more solid: boldness. This was no longer just about helping Emma. It was about reclaiming her own narrative, one riddled with loss, confusion, and a newfound purpose. A plan was coalescing, one that infused her being with an exhilarating sense of empowerment. Before she could second-guess herself, she pulled her phone from her pocket again, her fingers moving with deliberation. "What if he says no?" Emma asked, hesitantly, watching as Margaret drafted the message. "Then we'll find another angle. But if there's a chance—" A sudden alarm flooded Margaret's mind. Thomas's reputation was not without risk. He had enemies and alliances that could complicate their situation further. She recalled how certain alliances in her past had turned sour due to miscalculations. Did she risk entangling Emma deeper into a game she had little expertise in? Conflict raged within her. Yet Emma's gaze held a desperate trust that melted her fears. "It's worth it," Margaret whispered, hitting send before she could have second thoughts. As the message whooshed into the digital ether, the silence that followed felt charged with possibilities. They had forged a joint front, a pact to confront an adversary lurking in the shadows. Emma's nod of resolve affirmed this shared mission, yet Margaret could feel the glimmering uncertainty lurking beneath their newfound courage. Suddenly, her phone vibrated again, drawing Margaret's attention back to the screen. A reply flashed that left her breathless. As she read the words, a fresh wave of anxiety surged through her, threading through her heart like a tight grip. "Thomas is willing to meet," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But he wants to discuss something first, something he claims could change everything." Margaret's mind scrambled for clarity as the implications hung in the air. What did Thomas mean by something? Was it a revelation, a risk, or was it another layer of intrigue they had to navigate? The connection they sought now felt both exciting and perilous. Was it going to unravel everything they had planned? Or would it be the leap they needed to reclaim their power? As they exchanged wide-eyed glances, the stakes had never felt higher, both for Emma and for herself. The chase was on, and they were about to plunge deeper into the treacherous waters of family legacies, corporate power plays, and hidden truths. Would they come out on the other side with their lives and dreams intact, or be swept away in the current? With the future unwritten and the shadows closing in, Margaret braced for the next steps, fully aware that her decision to face this challenge head-on would come at a cost she hadn't yet foreseen. Margaret felt a wave of trepidation wash over her as she processed Thomas's willingness to meet. A blend of anticipation and anxiety churned in her stomach like a storm threatening to unleash its fury. She needed clarity, not just for her own sake, but for Emma's too. As the minutes dragged on, Margaret found herself struggling to focus. The urgency of their situation crept back into her thoughts, reminding her of how much was at stake. She stood up abruptly, shaking off the fog that clouded her mind. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a pivotal moment, a chance to redefine her role from bystander to a champion for Emma. "Emma," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart, "we need to prepare for our meeting with Thomas. I want to know exactly what we're walking into." Emma nodded, her expression shifting from uncertainty to resolve. "What do you think he'll want to discuss?" she asked, her tone a blend of curiosity and apprehension. Margaret paused, chewing on her lower lip, contemplating the possibilities. "If he's willing to part with information, it's crucial we approach this with caution. Whatever it is, it could be dangerous." They settled on the sofa again, a strategic war room transformed within the confines of their living room. Together they began to sort through old notes, past communications, anything that could offer insight into Thomas's mindset. It was more than a simple scavenger hunt for information. It was about diving deep into the past, unraveling layers of family complexities that had long been buried. As they rifled through papers, Margaret recalled their history with Thomas. He was not just a figure from Emma's past. He represented a life filled with choices that had consequences. Thomas's path had diverged from theirs long ago, tangled in webs of ambition and ethical gray areas that typically left people on opposite sides of the moral spectrum. What if he brings up old issues? What if we've opened up a can of worms that could explode in our faces? Emma's voice trembled slightly, mirroring Margaret's own fears. "Then it's my responsibility to protect you. No matter what," Margaret replied, her conviction igniting a flicker of hope in Emma's eyes. Taking a deep breath, Margaret allowed the fire of her determination to fuel her focus. They weren't just going to react. This time, they would strategize. "Let's make a list of what we need to ask, what we want from him. Clarity is our ally in this." As they penned down key questions, what began as a casual discussion morphed into a strategic session filled with potential inquiries. Thomas's motivations, the scope of his influence, and, ultimately, how both Emma and Margaret fit into this precarious puzzle, were paramount. Yet deep within, Margaret wrestled with a gnawing concern about her capabilities. She couldn't shake off the specter of her past failures, the moments when her decisions led to missteps that peeled layers off her confidence. But she frowned against it, determined to armor herself with the newly discovered boldness that had tethered her to this path. As the night deepened, the weight of their task pressed upon Margaret's shoulders. She felt an overwhelming desire not just to protect Emma, but to redeem her own sense of self-worth. Perhaps this meeting with Thomas was as much about confronting her past as it was about dealing with the present. Suddenly, another thought struck her. What if Thomas could provide the crucial information they needed, not just to face Claire, but also to understand the very origins of their plight? Her uncertainty morphed into a fierce resolve as clarity illuminated her thoughts. "Whatever he brings, we will face it together," she affirmed. As dawn broke, illuminating the room with a fresh light, Margaret felt an unfamiliar confidence swell within her. She was no longer acting out of fear. She was actively taking steps toward reclaiming her power. However, before she could bask in the warmth of that realization, the phone buzzed once again. Thomas had sent another message, this one containing an address, and along with it a cryptic note. "Bring your courage. We're treading into dangerous waters." With a sense of determination and dread intertwining in her chest, Margaret realized that their meeting could bring either salvation or catastrophe. As she read and reread his words, Margaret thought of the sacrifices they would face. Would she be ready to confront not just Thomas but also the demons he'd probably awaken? There was no turning back now. The time had come to face the storm she had decided to enter, regardless of the consequences. The foundation had been laid, and the stakes had never felt higher as they prepared for a confrontation that had the potential to change everything. Margaret stood at the threshold of the coffee shop, her heart racing. The scent of roasted beans wafted through the air, infusing her with an odd blend of energy and anxiety. This wasn't just a simple coffee run. It was her initiation into a high-stakes negotiation that could alter everything. She glanced at her watch, the hands creeping toward the designated meeting time. Each tick felt heavier than the last, amplifying the weight of her decision to engage with Thomas. As she stepped inside, the warm light enveloped her, but it did little to chase away the chilling thoughts of what lay ahead. She spotted Thomas seated at a corner table, his presence immediately commanding attention. He was clad in a dark blazer, an air of authority radiating from him. But beneath that facade lay layers of history that threatened to emerge at any moment. Margaret approached, her posture straight, but her breath shallow. She took a moment to collect herself before extending a hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Thomas." His grip was firm, a stark contrast to the uncertainty that lingered in her mind. "I didn't think you'd come," he stated, eyeing her with an inscrutable expression. "You've always been the reluctant one." Margaret sensed more in that statement than just acknowledgement. It felt like a challenge, a subconscious gamble to see how far she'd allow herself to be drawn into this encounter. "I'd like to think I've grown," she replied, her voice steady as she slid into the chair opposite him. They exchanged polite small talk, but Margaret's thoughts were churned by the purpose behind their meeting. She began to articulate her questions, probing into his motivations and weaving her inquiries delicately, as her mind raced through the potential implications each response might carry. "So why now?" she asked, controlling her tone to avoid any hint of accusation. "What changed to make you want to share with us?" Thomas stroked his chin thoughtfully, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Let's just say the past has a way of catching up with people. Sometimes addressing old wounds can yield unexpected insights." His cryptic words hung heavily in the air between them. Margaret hesitated, recognizing the familiar patterns of his cryptic language. She wondered if he was trying to manipulate the narrative, or if he genuinely believed he was offering something valuable, a knowledge that could be pivotal for Emma's future. She needed to dig deeper. "Then let's not beat around the bush. We need clarity about what you're offering. What specifically concerns Emma and me?" Her voice was assertive now, a stark contrast to her initial trepidation. Thomas leaned back, revealing a slight smile, a veneer of approval at her newfound assertiveness. "You've certainly developed a spine since our last encounter," he replied. "But this is a dance, Margaret. Information comes at a price." Margaret felt a flash of anger, fighting to keep it at bay. Did he expect her to barter her integrity for whatever he held over them? A shiver ran through her, but with it came a surge of resolve. No longer would she allow anyone, even Thomas, to dictate the terms of their engagement. "What if we refuse?" she challenged, staring directly into his eyes, her voice unwavering. "What if we pursue another route, one that doesn't include you at all?" The smile faded from his face, replaced with a seriousness that underscored the tension now building in the coffee shop. "You wouldn't want to do that, Margaret. I could be your ally, or I could become your greatest adversary in this." Her pulse quickened at the weight of his words. She could feel them coiling around her, squeezing tighter with each second. Margaret assessed her options, realizing she could either retreat into passivity or fight back in a way she never had before. This was her chance to reclaim autonomy, not just for herself, but for Emma. As they locked eyes, a silent understanding passed between them. This was about much more than a simple negotiation. It was a battle for control and agency, a moment steeped in the potential for both growth and peril. The stakes had risen dangerously high. Just as she was about to respond, her phone buzzed again, a sudden interruption that reminded her of the urgency simmering beneath the surface. It was a message from Emma. Are you okay? I'm worried. Margaret's heart raced anew, realizing that her decisions were no longer contained within her alone. They rippled outward to affect Emma. The weight of her responsibility felt heavier than before, but in that moment, she reaffirmed her resolve. If she really wanted to change their story, she'd have to weave through Thomas's intricate game carefully yet boldly. "Let's talk," Margaret said, her voice now laced with quiet strength. "But let's establish the rules. I'm not here to be a pawn in your game." As they began to lay the groundwork for a new dialogue, Margaret realized that this moment of confrontation could propel her into a fierce reckoning with not just Thomas, but with her own past decisions. She felt an electric pulse of hope flicker within her. She was on the edge of a decisive turning point, and the outcome lay within her grasp. The conversation deepened, but deep inside, Margaret understood that this was only the beginning. With every revelation, she sensed that shadows of the past were closing in, darkening her path forward. She would have to confront not only Thomas, but also the shadows that lingered at her back, whispering doubts that threatened to unravel her resolve. As she forced herself to stay present, a new determination spurred her onward. But what she did not know was that some revelations would not come from Thomas, but from her own buried truths, waiting to emerge at the most unforeseen moment. Would she be ready to face them when they did? The conversation lingered in the air, thick with implications as Margaret settled into the negotiation. The atmosphere shifted, the coffee shop fading into the background as her focus honed in on Thomas. Each word exchanged felt like stepping deeper into a labyrinth, one she had to navigate with caution, aware that any misstep could cost them dearly. "Let's talk terms, then," Thomas prompted, a flicker of intrigue lighting his eyes. He leaned forward, his posture sharp, conveying a mixture of challenge and anticipation. "What do you want for Emma? What's your endgame here?" Margaret felt the weight of his questions settle between them, testing her resolve. Did she even know the answer? She envisioned Emma's future and what it meant to carve out a space for authenticity and stability, a sanctuary free from lingering influences like those of Thomas. "I want her to be safe and empowered," she managed, the conviction in her voice surprising her. "I want her to have the freedom to choose her own path, and I want us to do that without your interference." The resolve in her words surprised not only Thomas but herself. The nuances of her own desires became clearer in that moment. She was no longer just defending against his influence. She was advocating for Emma's autonomy, a concept she had not firmly grasped until now. Margaret's heart began to steady, her pulse slowing as clarity replaced trepidation. "Safe and empowered?" Thomas echoed, amusement flickering across his features. "That's naive. The world isn't as simple as that, Margaret. She will need guidance, strategy. That's where I come in." Margaret's instinct kicked in, a protective arrogance igniting within her. "And what does that guidance cost us, Thomas? What strings will be attached? I've seen your kind of help before. It often carries a price too steep to pay." The shadows of past encounters hung heavy in her mind, recounting the manipulation and sleight of hand. Thomas's smirk widened, revealing the loss of control gravitating toward him. For years, she had permitted herself to be a pawn, but today marked a potential shift in that narrative. "Perhaps I've underestimated you," he conceded, his facade waning for just an instant. Yet, beneath the words, she sensed desperation, a desire to maintain the upper hand that was slowly slipping away. "Tell me then, what do you propose?" Margaret felt the moment swell, a critical juncture that could define their futures. An idea began to form. What if she offered Thomas something he clearly coveted, yet conditioned it under her stringent terms? "Let's go one for one," she proposed, her voice steadier than she felt. "You share what you know about Emma's father's past, and I ensure you remain in the conversation regarding her future." His brows lifted, surprise shifting to calculation as he weighed her proposition. You're bold, I'll give you that. But what assurances do I have that you won't simply walk away after I share? Margaret shifted in her seat, momentarily taken aback, but then reasserting her control. The assurance is in your knowledge. Holding what you know over us will only weaken your position. You need to understand. Emma's safety is paramount to me. She's not a bargaining chip. The silence deepened, a standoff brewing in the air as they assessed each other. Thomas's gaze bore into hers, seeming to probe for any sign of influence he could exploit. Yet as she held his stare, her backbone hardened. No longer was she the hesitant negotiator. She felt a new capacity for strength unfurl within her, a budding confidence founded on desperation turned into agency. As he started to speak, the communication faltered. His face reflected a mix of admiration and irritation over her audacity. For the first time, she felt the tides of power begin to shift. Just then, a chorus of laughter erupted from a neighboring table, a reminder of the world beyond their intense exchange. It broke the serious mood, heightening her awareness of the stakes at hand. The stakes for Emma's future, for her own resolve, and for reclaiming a sense of purpose she thought lost. "Let's deal," he finally relented, a hint of respect interspersed within the skepticism. "But be warned, Margaret. Sometimes knowledge breeds more complications than you anticipate." Margaret felt a shudder of apprehension at his words, but behind her apprehension lay a stubborn resolve. This was the threshold of a transition. She was no longer a passive participant in her life or Emma's. As they exchanged agreed terms, she couldn't shake the feeling that the revelations Thomas held were linked to darker truths, ones that might shake the foundations of their fragile world. Would she uncover insights that could empower them, or merely deepen their complexities, drawing forth shadows from every corner of her past? With that thought, the edges of her burgeoning strength began to feel frayed, like a tether that could snap at any moment. But Margaret stood firm, ready to unravel the layers that surrounded her. The negotiation was only the beginning. And as the tension settled, Margaret realized what she had traded might lead her directly into the path of secrets that could change everything she believed about Thomas, her own capacity for empowerment, and the truth about her relationship with Emma. She shivered, a question piercing through her newfound clarity. What revelations lay waiting on the other side of his cryptic acknowledgement? The air in the coffee shop buzzed with an undercurrent of promise and peril. Margaret's mind raced as she processed the heavy weight of her newfound resolve. She had engaged in a dangerous dance with Thomas, but it was all for Emma. Now, she was determined to forge a different path, one riddled with uncertainty, yet ripe with possibility. As Thomas stood, his figure sharp against the muted colors of the cafe, Margaret felt the transformation within herself ripple outward. She had traded vulnerability for power, but the exchange came with invisible chains. What if Thomas leveraged the information he had on Emma's father against her? The nagging concern clawed at her, yet she pushed it aside. She had chosen this course, and now she had to embrace it fully. Leaving the shop, the brisk air slapped against her face, invigorating her senses. Each step felt deliberate, laden with purpose. Thoughts of Emma's future whirled in her mind. Would knowledge of her father's past bring his ghosts to life, or would it merely serve as a roadmap for Emma's empowerment? Once home, she sank into her armchair, a small island of calm amid the storm she had unleashed. The negotiations had shaken something within her, igniting a power she hadn't realized existed. She sensed a fundamental shift, but with it came the daunting weight of responsibility. Her heart trembled at what she might unearth. The queries clamored for attention in her mind. How would Emma respond to the revelations about her father? Would the truth draw them closer or tear them apart? Margaret's protective instincts surged as she recalled her upbringing, one largely dictated by fear and obligation. Would she allow Emma to face similar threats? No. She had to be the guiding light this time. With newfound determination, she brought out a notepad, mapping out her strategy. Seeking the truth from Thomas was step one, but should she pursue more? What other avenues could she explore to empower Emma? An idea flickered in her mind, a support network that would help both her and Emma navigate this complicated terrain. People who had endured their own battles and emerged stronger could unlock a wealth of knowledge and experience. Margaret picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts. Each name represented a possible ally. She hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Just as she was about to dial, uncertainty clawed at her. What would she say? Would they understand the nuance of her struggle? Her own fears wrapped around her confidence like a shadow, threatening to drown out her resolve. Shaking her head, she put the phone down. No more retreat. If she genuinely wanted to empower Emma, she had to step into the light. She took a deep breath, letting it fill her lungs, then exhaled slowly. Each breath was a reminder. Empowerment began with her choice to act. And yet, despite her determination, she knew there was still much left to uncover. The terror of truth lingered like a specter, ready to rise as a consequence of her decisions. Questions sharpened like knives. What lay beneath the surface of Thomas's information? What would happen when she accessed those layers of reality? Rising from her chair, she began pacing the room, her energy uncontainable. Each step mirrored her internal conflict. She felt invigorated, yet apprehensive. The initiation of honest dialogue with Thomas and the potential fallout weighed heavily upon her shoulders. But she steeled herself for it. She would confront the ghosts that loomed over Emma's life. She would not be a pawn any longer, nor would she allow her daughter to become one. Margaret's resolve solidified her path as she chose to delve deeper into the shadows of her family's past. The truth might break them apart, but it could also harness their strength in ways she could only begin to fathom. With a way forward crystallizing in her mind, she turned to fetch her notebook again. The outline of a plan unfolded, one weaving together her confrontations with Thomas and building a support system for Emma. But as her fingers danced across the pages, another daunting revelation hit her. What if the truths she sought meant confronting not just Thomas, but long-buried secrets of her own? In that moment, Margaret felt a chill race down her spine. The possibilities seemed endless, and the courage she'd found began to feel threatened by the weight of her own past. The journey of empowerment was becoming more layered, and with every choice, the stakes were rising. Would the truth set them free, or bind them in ways they couldn't comprehend? She closed her eyes, the enormity of her tasks looming before her. The adventure was only just beginning, an uncharted path ahead of her. And with that unspoken question leading her forward, she felt the pull to not just discover the truth about Emma's father, but her own truth as well. Would she have the strength to face what lay hidden from view? The morning sun spilled through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing lazily in the air. Margaret woke with a jolt, remnants of her nervous dreams clinging to her like cobwebs. Today was the day to confront Thomas. The pulsating urgency inside her propelled her out of bed as she slipped into clothes that felt more like armor than fabric. After a quick breakfast, she paced the kitchen, mentally crafting the confrontation she had rehearsed 100 times over. What tone should she take? Should she be aggressive or strategic? Each scenario played out in her mind like a film gone awry, stuck on a loop, highlighting her doubts. This was more than just a discussion about Emma's father. It was a reckoning. She glanced at the clock. Time was slipping away. Margaret grabbed her notebook, where she had written a myriad of questions and concerns. But as she flipped it open, she hesitated. What if he didn't have the answers she sought? What if he only reinforced the fears she tried so hard to shake? The possibility gnawed at her. She needed to find an anchor, a reason to push through her turmoil. Just then, her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from an old friend, Amelia, appeared. "Thinking of you. Let's catch up soon?" Amelia had been through her own upheavals, and the weight of shared struggles had forged a bond between them. In a single moment, Margaret felt a flicker of resolve ignite. She could benefit from a sisterhood that understood her plight. Yet still, she lacked the courage to reach out. She had chosen solitude as a protective barrier, but perhaps it was time to dismantle it. Battling thoughts of her friend, she finally resolved to make the call to Thomas, the very linchpin of her plan. Digging deep, she summoned the strength that had begun to unravel the chains of her past, the strength that came from being not just a mother, but a beacon for Emma's future. The phone rang, each sound grating against her nerves. "Hello, Thomas," she finally managed, her voice steady but lacking the confidence she desperately sought. "Margaret," he responded, the disinterest in his tone almost palpable. "What's on your mind?" Cutting past the pleasantries, she lashed out with the pointed question that had burned within her for too long. "Why did you keep Emma's father's history a secret? You knew how it affected me." An uncomfortable silence stretched before him. When he spoke again, his voice was calculated and calm. "You don't understand. I had reasons that you're not aware of. Emotions are complicated, and so are people." Those words ignited a fire within her. "You don't get to hide behind your excuses. This is about Emma. If you care for her even a little, you owe it to her to be honest." His tone shifted. There was a hint of defensiveness. "You think you can just bully historical truths out of me? There are implications you can't even imagine." His words landed hard, pricking every vulnerable fear she thought she had begun to manage. Yet she wouldn't let that shake her. "I'm not asking to bully. I want to understand so I can help my daughter navigate the future that is hers to control." As they spoke, Margaret felt a clarity begin to form, an unexpected realization washing over her. The confrontation was not meant to solely extract the details of Emma's past, but to illuminate her own flawed history as well. Every hesitation Thomas exhibited mirrored her own, revealing the layers of self-preservation she had wrapped around every interaction in her life. "Maybe," Thomas conceded, "you're right. The truth is buried under so much fear." The relief of his confession sent a ripple of empowerment through her. She realized that it wasn't just about Emma anymore. She, too, was entangled in the web of hidden truths. Where once the fear of the unknown loomed ominously, now it shimmered with possibility. But the conversation left her lingering in a new uncertainty. The acknowledgement from Thomas didn't come with a set of answers. The implications of what they were unearthing would cut deeper than she anticipated. As they hung up, Margaret took a moment to breathe deeply, the anxiety ebbing slightly at the thrill of potential change on the horizon. But she knew now she had to confront not only Thomas, but also her own shadows, those dark corners of her life that had remained untouched for too long. In that moment, Margaret understood that the path to empowerment hinged on facing buried truths, even if they threatened to upend everything she thought she knew. What lay in store was bound to challenge her, but it was a journey she could no longer avoid. With her notebook beside her, she began jotting down more than questions. She noted strategies for embracing not simply Emma's truth, but her own as well. It was time to dig deeper into the soil of her family's past. Margaret leaned against the counter, pencil poised above the page, a sense of fierce determination igniting her heart. Would she have the courage to explore those buried layers? And what surprises would she find waiting in the shadows of her own past? Margaret sat in the quiet of her kitchen, the rhythmic scratching of her pencil becoming a temporary balm against her racing thoughts. As she considered her next steps, the looming question picked at her mind. What had she been avoiding in her own life? For years, she had tucked away pieces of her past beneath layers of denial, believing that shielding herself and Emma would lead to safety. Now, she was beginning to see the cracks in that illusion. She recalled a pivotal moment during her childhood, a time when she had witnessed the devastation that secrets could wreak. Her mother had struggled silently, grappling with her hidden struggles and fears, until it consumed her. Margaret had resolved then to never let silence snuff out her voice. Yet here she was, slipping into the very patterns she vowed to change. It was time for transformation, not just for Emma, but for herself. With determination settling in her bones, Margaret flipped to a blank page in her notebook. Each line became a canvas for her ambitions and insights. Empowerment required vulnerability, and by acknowledging her fears, she hoped to dismantle their hold. She began with a list. What am I afraid of? The answers flowed like water. Failure, rejection, facing the shattered pieces of her childhood. But right alongside those fears, she penned her aspirations: strength, understanding, being the mother Emma deserved. As she wrote, a vision started to crystallize in her mind. What if she organized a gathering of mothers in her community? A space where stories could be shared, relationships could be fortified, healing could take root. The very thought sparked a wave of anxiety, but also exhilaration. This could be the beginning of confronting not just her past, but perhaps helping others do the same. The phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Amelia. Want to grab coffee later? The invitation felt like a lifeline, an opportunity to reconnect and to share her budding idea. Maybe they could discuss their experiences and how motherhood had molded them. The thought brought a strange comfort. The connection she craved was within reach. Perhaps it was time to lean into this support. Margaret replied with a quick yes, her heart racing at the prospect of vulnerability after years of shying away from anyone who came too close. Yet this time, it felt different. Armed with her notebook and a new resolve, she was ready to forge through the conversation with strategic intent. How could she turn her unease into mutual empowerment? The hours passed, and soon she found herself seated across from Amelia in a cozy corner cafe. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, igniting a familiar sense of warmth. As she saw her friend, Margaret noticed how radiant she looked, a stark contrast to the weight that had burdened them both when they last met. There was strength in their shared history, and for the first time, it felt like a shared power. "Hey, there you are," Amelia said, her smile lighting up the space. "You look like you're ready to take on the world." Margaret chuckled, feeling the ice of her hesitation begin to thaw. "I'm trying to figure a few things out, actually, including a community project that could help us all." They began to talk, and with each exchange, Margaret felt herself shedding layers of discomfort. She shared her desire to create a gathering, a place for mothers to convene and support one another. To her surprise, Amelia's eyes sparkled with excitement. "That sounds incredible. I'd love to help you with that. We all carry burdens, and finding a way to lighten the load together could be powerful." As they plotted the details, Margaret felt a renewed belief in her instincts. She wasn't just crafting a project, she was opening a box of her own unspoken fears and hidden potentials. Each idea flowed seamlessly, lighting a path forward that had once seemed insurmountable. But beneath the layer of excitement loomed the question of Thomas and what they had begun to unravel together. Would he be a part of this? Would he embrace the growth they were both inching toward? The thought sent a wave of uncertainty through her. As they finished their coffee and laughter hung in the air, Margaret knew she was at a precipice. She had initiated something more significant than a conversation with Thomas. She was about to step into a more honest version of herself. But with this empowerment came a daunting clarity. What if Thomas resisted change, clinging to secrets that could derail everything she was trying to build? The corners of her heart tightened at the thought. "Let's meet again soon, okay?" Amelia said, disrupting her thoughts, and Margaret nodded with a newfound sense of purpose. Later that night, as she lay in bed, her notebook by her side filled with plans, fears, and ambitions, Margaret took a deep breath. She realized that the journey ahead was fraught with potential confrontations that extended far beyond the past, stretching into the very fabric of her identity. Would she be able to reconcile her past with her present? And in confronting Thomas's truth, would she find the strength to forge a new legacy for Emma? Her heart raced, and she knew the next step awaited her, one that could change everything yet again. A soft light filtered through Margaret's curtains, casting gentle rays upon the pages of her notebook. Today marked a new chapter, not only for her, but for Emma. She awoke with renewed vigor, a sense of purpose driving her. The daunting confrontation with Thomas still loomed ahead like a mountain to climb, but her resolve had solidified. The connections forged with Amelia made her realize that she would not navigate this journey alone, even if the shadows of their past threatened to engulf them. Margaret gathered her thoughts as she brewed her morning coffee, the warm aroma filling the kitchen as she reflected on the conversations she had begun to dissolve the silence surrounding her family's history. Every word she exchanged with Amelia had been a salve, igniting a spark that fed her ambition for clarity and compassion in the face of family secrets. After breakfast, Margaret made her way to the park, where she and Emma often sought solace amidst nature. As she walked, she couldn't help but replay the potential conversations she would have with Thomas. It was inevitable. This encounter would lay bare past connections, revealing the roots of the complexities both she and Emma faced. The thought both excited and terrified her. Upon reaching the park, her heart raced as she saw Emma sitting on a bench, a picturesque image of calm amid the chirping of birds. Margaret's breath caught when Emma looked up, a hint of worry brushing her features. "What's on your mind?" she asked, her voice a gentle whisper yet ripe with concern. Margaret took her seat beside Emma, the weight of her doubts pressing down like a heavy cloak. "I'm about to confront Thomas about your father's past. It's time to clear the air," she confessed, her voice quivering slightly with the enormity of the task ahead. Emma's eyes widened, a blend of fear and curiosity swirling within them. "Do you think he'll be willing to talk?" Margaret nodded. "He has to. We deserve answers, and I need you to know the truth about your history so we can face it together." The mention of "together" resonated deeply between them, bridging gaps of uncertainty. Margaret's confidence swelled as she recognized how, with every step taken, the revoking of silence brought them closer in their shared experience. Together, they were weaving a sturdy rope against the currents of their fears. "I want to know," Emma breathed, clenching her hands. "But I also worry it's not just uncovering the truth, it's confronting a past that might hurt." Margaret's heart ached with empathy. And it might? But the unknown hurts even more, doesn't it? It's time we take control of our narrative. And that starts with honesty. At that moment, a breeze threaded through the park, carrying with it a sense of shared strength. Emma looked at her mother-in-law, a slow nod of acceptance gracing her features. "You're right. I trust you." With that, Margaret felt a wave of empowerment wash over her, solidifying their bond. They spent the next hour planning not just for their meeting with Thomas, but also envisioning the gathering of mothers they had discussed. Each idea ignited a fire within them, forming not just plans, but a pathway toward reassured resilience. As they prepared to leave the park, a message notification chimed on Margaret's phone. It was Thomas. "I'm ready to discuss the past. Meet me today at noon," the message read. Margaret looked at Emma, and in that glance exchanged were numerous unspoken words, a potent mixture of fear, determination, and resolve. Upon arriving at the designated meeting spot, Margaret braced herself for the upcoming exchange. The cafe buzzed with life, but she could only focus on the man who would come to define so much of Emma's legacy. Her heart raced like a drum, each beat echoing her pursuit of agency. When Thomas arrived, the air shifted. His presence commanded attention, pulling both Margaret and Emma into the past's contested narrative. The interaction felt electric, charged with potential. But Margaret wouldn't allow herself to be intimidated. As they settled down, Margaret wasted no time. "You need to tell us everything about Emma's father. We deserve your honesty, not just for us, but for your relationship with Emma." The tension coiled tighter as Thomas studied Margaret, the walls he had built around himself evident. Then, inching forward, he began to unravel pieces of the past. Stories of several wrong turns, buried families, and the echo of choices that shaped more than just his life, but cast shadows onto Emma's as well. As unrelenting as the details they uncovered could be, Margaret felt a resoluteness rising within her. Naming the past wasn't just an exercise in dredging up painful memories, it was carving out a future built on truth. Each word represented a crack in the facade that had once shielded them all, inviting light to seep through. Through it all, she witnessed Emma absorbing the weight of the truth, her face expression morphing between shock and understanding, interwoven with empathy. They were no longer passive observers, they were reclaiming agency over their narratives. As they exited the cafe, an unspoken understanding settled between Margaret and Emma, a genuine appreciation for the interconnectedness of their growth. Out there stood a world filled with possibility, and the journey of healing had solidified them into partners ready to face whatever came next. In that moment of clarity and connection, Margaret realized she had transformed. No longer simply a mother figuring things out, she was a powerful force, an advocate standing strong for her family, ready to nurture Emma's ascent into her own power. Through confronting Thomas and fabricating a brave path forward, Margaret, too, had reclaimed her voice and her purpose. The relief brought a surprising clarity. This journey was theirs to navigate, and together they were a resilient duo equipped to face life's challenges. As the sun dipped closer to the horizon, they walked side by side, bridging the past and present, determined to carve a new legacy together, one built on honesty, love, and undeniable strength. Now, I implore you, if you felt this transformative journey, subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support our growth. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending. We want to hear from you. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to empower their narratives just like Margaret and Emma. You need to support this channel. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of taking these actions. Don't wait even one more second.